right, good morning, everyone. We leave our heart troubles behind us. We're moving on to the practical. In lab this week, on Wednesday, I'll open up 2 current clouds. One you do in person, for A this week, B next week, and then one you do online. They're both on respiratory. So I'll go over anatomy and breathing things. There'll be some new stuff in there, so I'll just review for the test. That's the plan. Respiratory next 2 weeks. I'll give a urinary lecture to you guys right now, begin it. Then I'll have an online one up there. And I'll see you next time, and I'll finish up urinary and begin a chapter on electrolytes and water kind of thing. So you guys should have studied respiratory system. Kind of beyond that, we have labs to do that, and then urinary big time. It can be complicated. And then keep in mind that chapter 21 is one chapter on there, and a short one, but water electrolytes. I'll be on the next exam. This week, next week, and any questions on that? All right. Well, urinary, yes. Just talking last night about how some people say the nephrologists are the smartest people in the hospital. Some of this is complicated. Look at kidney function. But we'll see how this and how the nephrologists argue with the cardiac people in the hospital, because the cardiac people want to lower your fluids in your body, but they often do it by working on your kidneys, and it kind of makes the kidney people mad when you're trying to, when it's hard on the kidneys, getting all that water, but you get water for the heart people. This excretory is not like waste, like digestive waste. It's going to filter your blood. So your kidneys are just amazing. You guys, I mean, after this section, you take your kidneys for granted. Whether you have a kidney stone or kidney infection, but otherwise you take them for granted. They just work, and you live your lives. But they have the amazing ability, especially like your body fluids. If you think about it, you could drink tons of water one day, and just a little bit of water the next day. You carry around those gallons, just drink all that water. And you have to pee out just as much as you take in. I mean, you lose some through sweat and stuff, but so if you drink gallons of water today, you got to pee out like a gallon and a half. You drink a little bit of water, you only pee out a little bit of water. So if you didn't, you'd like blow up or shrink like a raisin. So these kidneys have the ability to know your water levels and make the pee either really dark or really light or lots of. And not only that, all of your calcium, magnesium, sodium, phosphates, sulfates, the kidney individually decides, can you get rid of or hold on to each one of these things. So it's like this really complicated filter that can adjust for phosphate and sodium. Wow. So pretty amazing. And you know, if you take kidney failure, you die. You can't live without kidneys. I'm talking about dialysis, but yeah, you can't live long without this filter of your blood. And it does it, like if you have a filter, a coffee filter or a Brita filter, some kind of water filter, it's usually gravity. You put your filter paper, and the water pushes it down. This will be powered by blood pressure. So blood pressure is going to push the blood against this membrane, and all this fluid will come out. A lot of fluid will come out. And there's big things like blood cells and big proteins will stay in the blood, but little things will come out. And then your kidneys will take back all the good stuff, the vitamins, the sugar, the water. And the remaining will be the waste, which will come down and be stored in your bladder. Well, we are creatures that need a lot of water to wash out the waste. So you drink lots of water that'll wash out the waste. All right. So, cool stuff. Kidneys, and he's renal or nephrologist. Renal is kidneys, renal failure, things like that. Today's lecture, I'm talking about the anatomy, gross anatomy, microscopic anatomy. Then lecture will get into how it works individually in the little tubes in the nephrons, how you have sodium, potassium, water, what's doing it, what's happening in different places. That's the plan. Oh, kidneys. Yeah, homeostasis. You got to think kidneys in terms of, you know, all the cells in your bodies are very picky. They need everything perfect. The right amount of the pH, the right amount of, like I said, sodium and potassium. Got to be just right for your nerves. And your kidneys are a huge part of that. And of course, they're not really that smart. I mean, they're under the influence of hormones like ADH and aldosterone, the ones we talked about that will tell it what to do. But they will adjust your water, your electrolytes, get rid of waste. think about what would be the first symptom if you had kidney failure. It depends what's wrong with your kidney, but basically you're gonna have waste build up in your blood. So you'll see, especially your blood, your creatinine, your urea, things with nitrogen are gonna build up because that's the point of the kidneys is to filter out waste. Acidic, you're gonna lots of hydrogen ions. If you are eating pretzels, your pee will have a lot of sodium in it, so it's pretty cool. And drugs too. Pharmacologically, you take drugs, they're either broken down renally or hepatically. I mean, it's your liver, your kidneys, but your kidneys ultimately will get rid of any drugs that you take so they don't build up at high levels. They're broken down, you pee them out. Which is the way we can test for illicit drugs, right? Urine test, right? Yeah. So we have two. Do you need two kidneys? No. There's lots of people walk around with one kidney. Can you live with half a kidney? Oh, you can live. You know, we get to a point where you don't have enough kidney that, in fact, it's not compatible with life because you just can't get your face. Yeah, and then our bladder, the urinary bladder is going to store this urine. Breathe through the tubes to the outside. Here they are. They're shaped like a kidney bean, which is so coincidental. I'm just kidding, it's not. Many kidney beans have been with kidneys. But you can see they have this is the hilum, over the hilum and other organs where the blood vessels come in. And I'll wow you with facts, but let me just tell you, every heartbeat, about a quarter of the blood goes to the freaking kidneys. They only weigh like 1% of your body. So these kidneys get a lot of blood. And they're going to filter that blood. They return the filtered blood to the renal veins back into the so the renal arteries come off the aorta. Tons of blood is going to be pushed to that kidney. Renal veins will drain it out once it's been filtered. And the filtrate, the urine, is going to come out this tube, these two ureters that are going to, I'll talk about how it comes into the bladder at an angle. Bladder comes up. And you can see a little bit of the internal workings of the kidney here. And then this dye, we're going to see how these are the collecting tubules that collect the pee. And the ureters, just to tell you, they actually squeeze the urine down. Like it's not like it just falls by gravity, because you can stand in your head and still get urine pushed upward. So it's just it squeezes out the urine and it's going to empty into that bladder and kill it. All right, so some of these wastes. Nitrogenous wastes are the problem. So you break down proteins. So those of you that are in an Atkins diet, really high protein, it's hard on the kidneys because you got to get rid of a lot of nitrogenous waste. If you're on a carb diet, I think there's a carb diet, but you just eat, sugar and pasta. You're mostly eating these carbohydrates, so they don't have nitrogen. Carbohydrates. The nitrogen turns into ammonia. Ammonia is toxic. So turns out if you're a fish, you just make ammonia because you live in water. You just pee it out. Who cares? But in us, we make urea, which is this middle one. So the blue is nitrogen. You can see that, and oxygen, carbon on it. So here we get rid of two nitrogens in one. But we have to build this, from this, and so it takes a little bit of energy. Your liver is going to take a couple of ammonias, put them together with a carbon and an oxygen. And then you make a little uric acid too. This is what I'll show you. Reptiles, exclusively birds, make this. Here you can see you get rid of 4 nitrogens. It's a big molecule. This one dissolves in water beautifully, so your pee comes out watery, right? You smell the urea. Well, old pee smells bad because the urea breaks down to ammonia and that comes out. So fresh pee doesn't smell great, but it doesn't smell bad like the pee's been sitting there a while. Well, another story. But here you are with urea, that's what you're making. And it takes energy to make these, of course. So to make this, you have to use ATP to build this molecule, but you get rid of 4 nitrogens in one. And this is a lot less soluble in water. Yeah, so if you look at the urine wastes, I kept a lot of snakes. I had a whole room of snakes and lizards and parrots and birds. Their urine is white. You know, bird poop is white, chalky. It depends if it's like a bird's been eating fruit, it'd be like kind of purpley fruit, and that'll be this white. There's always that white paste. That's what snake poop looks like, and bird poop looks like white. Oh, that's uric acid. So they get rid of uric acid. If you're a bird, you can't fly with it full of water. It's too heavy, you know. So they make this uric acid more concentrated place. Yeah. And interestingly, if you buy some shark at Hanover or something like that, sharks build up urea in their tissues. They're like high levels that would kill us. So sometimes it says to soak shark steaks and milk to kind of figure it out. I don't have any problem. Yeah, so this bird poop is uric acid. That's what birds eat, right? Now, we use a lot of water, and we don't have to make uric acid, we can make urine with urea. And so fish and stuff just get rid of ammonia. We have ammonia in our bodies, so we turn this into urea. So urea, of course, is in our bloodstream, and our kidneys filter it out and feed out. So see, we get rid of 2 nitrogens in 1 molecule there. And uric acid has 4 nitrogens. This is what reptiles and birds do. Oh, you don't have to know this, but spiders make guanine instead. See all the nitrogen they get rid of? It's like one of the ACTG in DNA. But the guanine, they can use that for, they look for like how many house mites, because the guanine is related to how many spiders you have. So it's kind of, so they use something a little bit different. There's a technique. All right. Now, in terms of water, like I say, it keeps it just right. So no matter how much you drink, you pee out, so you have this homeostasis. I always wonder how much, what can you lose like in the desert? What percentage? I don't know, it doesn't seem like much. 12%. Huh? Yeah. And in the hospital, that's what they do when they see a diuretic. I want to say, they got a patient, usually an elderly person that they're given diuretics, and they'll weigh them. If they lose 5 pounds or gain 5 pounds, it's water weight, in a day. You're not going to gain that muscle in the hospital. Right? So they can look at a percentage of water comes in and out, but yeah, don't put any water. You can have water. So that's what you got. And we'll talk about the last chapter, how if you're dying of thirst and dehydration, what happens. Any questions so far? A kidney doctor, nephrologist. You're going to see a nephron is a little unit. You got 1 million in each kidney. Drugs that work on it, a lot of diuretics. Don't forget that. You should pee out the water, so diuretics. Okay, big picture. All right. So, like I say, the cardiac output. My God, your book says something like 15 to 30% of your blood goes to the kidney. So you just round it 25%, just kind of the middle. Which is amazing for these little organs, these little kidney-shaped organs that receive so much blood, but it's a filter. Yeah. Your spleen was a filter too. Your spleen was more of an immunological filter. Your spleen was like a big lymph node, and it did get rid of like aged red blood cells, and it took care of like any bacteria in your blood. Your kidneys are more chemical. You're looking for nitrogenous substances, urea, toxic substances, normal drugs, electrolytes. It's so related, right? Just the cardiovascular system, right? I mean, the heart provides the power to run the kidneys and the blood. Yeah, it's all related. All right, so how much urine do you produce? Oh, everyone's different. Depends how much you drink, right? But yeah, 1, 2 liters. Everyone's thinking about like a 2-liter bottle. That seems like a lot of pee. Depends on the day, I guess. All right, and then also endocrine organ. Your kidneys, you should know these, it's kind of a fun fact, but for one thing, vitamin D is activating your kidneys. And then this is where we make EPO mostly. Erythropoietin is the hormone that makes your bone marrow make more red blood cells. So you'll see if there's kidney failure, you've got people that are anemic. How the hell is that related? Well, it's because failing kidneys, they don't make EPO. And then I'm going to talk about renal, and I'm going to talk finally. I kind of alluded to it a little bit in the hormone chapter and what else? Blood pressure chapter. So renin is going to be a hormone made by the kidneys that's going to notice if you have low blood pressure and do everything to hike that blood pressure. You're going to die. Blood pressure taking, renin will be secreted, and will make all these things happen, make your blood pressure go back up. Yeah, so these things, besides filtering blood, remember EPO, vitamin D is made into an active form, and then we'll talk about renin. Oh, we have a fun lab, you guys. We're going to look at your urine. We're going to test your urine for not drugs or pregnancy, like that, but we're going to test for things like sugar, proteins, and centrifuges. The yellow color actually comes from breakdown of blood cells. We talked about bilirubin, but it's another substance kind of gets at that yellowish color. And there are some things that can turn your pee green or orange, or some drugs that weird side effects like that. Obviously, if it's red, you could have blood. A lot of things from bladder cancer to. All right, what does it look like? What kidneys? You don't even eat a lot of organs here in the United States, but other places in Europe and France, I mean, kidneys are eaten more often. But they're little organs that sit there. You see one's higher than the other. Let's talk about that. And then they're connected, obviously, to the renal artery and vein. And your adrenal glands are on top of them, but they're not really. They're not connected. Adrenal glands make it epinephrine, steroid hormones, right? Yeah, and then I'll show you where they're sitting along your back here. Because it's a little unusual where they're at. And they're covered with tons of fat. Oh my God, yeah. If you want to get them in a cadaver, they're stuck on the back wall, and they're in like 1 inch and 2 inches of fat. So that's protection. Protection, a little insulation back there, right? I think sometimes when you have like these can warmers for hunting in the woods, something like that, you put them in the kidney region or into the blood. I don't know if that really works too well. Oh, this is a weird view, but it's a transverse section through a person. And the kidneys are what's called retroperitoneal. Okay, here's the peritoneum, which is going to be the lining. Remember like the parietal pleura, parietal pericardium. The peritoneum is what lines your abdominal cavity, and these are behind it. So they're behind that saran wrap that your liver, your stomach, your spleen, they're all in the cavity. The kidneys are behind the cavity. So if you want to get to the kidney, you normally don't go through this way. You normally go through the back. That way you don't enter that peritoneal cavity for your organs. So kidneys are called retroperitoneal. They're behind the peritoneal membrane. They're not really in the same cavity as your stomach and your intestines. Cool. And you see the fat around it? The perirenal fat, tons of fat. Yeah. And none of you, what's the reason? You almost always have about an inch apart. And they go from about, I think, like T12 down to L3. And your kidneys can move as you guys jog and run and shoot a layup. Your kidneys actually go up and down. They're mobile. You can have two mobile kidneys, and that can cause all kinds of problems. They should move a little bit, and they're stuck in the fat and behind that, so that they move. Well, the reason one's a little bit higher, if you look at what's going on, is that your liver is on the right side. And so the kidneys are pushed down a little bit. Right? So your left kidneys about an inch or so higher. And again, that's how you get to it. All right. I think it's time to talk anatomy. I think it's time to get right in there. Yeah. Here we are. You can buy kidneys at market basket. You should get some fresh ones. We'll dissect them in lab. We'll have a nice big, huge sheep kidney or stuff like that. And we'll look inside, we'll see that. It's really cool. Yeah. And in cadavers, this is nice and smooth. In cadavers, when you're 80, 90 years old, you see it looks like the surface of the moon. You've got craters and little cysts. It's not as pretty. If you have high blood pressure, it kind of looks like granulated sugars. It's a nice smooth kidney. You can see the shape of it. It's called the hilum. And I mentioned it last time with lymph nodes too. The hilum is this indentation with the arteries, veins, nerves, lymphatics, and in and out. And then looking, this one's been cut open a little bit. So you can see that all the urine is collected in these yellow tubes. All the pee drips down in these tubes. And once it's in here, nothing happens to it. The urine comes down, like we don't change it. So once it drips out of your kidney, that's it. And it's urine, and it's on its way out. And you can see a lot of, see the fat in here? So this little region here is called the renal pelvis. It's filled with fat and these tubes collecting the urine that the kidney gets made. The kidney will drip urine out the tips of these pyramids. They'll collect in these tubes into this big renal pelvis, and that'll go down the ureter all the way down to the bladder. Y'all see the big renal artery and vein, they're huge. You see the adrenal gland above it. Let's see. Ah, is that showing up? Yes, it is. There's my kidney. All right, so I'll just point out some anatomy of this. What you have are these pyramids, and you got about, I don't know, a dozen, 20. Oh, look at that. I don't even have a pen up here. It's my finger, man. All right, there's these pyramids. We'll see, like overall, looking at anatomy, the outside is called the cortex and the inner is the medulla, right? We've done that before. I'm not going to try to fool with the color. Oh, thought I was going so good. Here we go. Yes. So this is the cortex. Just that outer part. And the whole middle, everything inside of it is going to be the medulla. It's going to be everything from here to here. So the cortex on the outside, that's the cortex of anything. We looked at the adrenal gland, cortex and medulla, right? Cortex and medulla, those are the pyramids. And the pyramids, whenever you look at this, it's two-dimensional. It looks like a triangle. But in life, it's actually three-dimensional, like a pyramid in Egypt. It has a little tip, a little top to it. The little top at the end is called the papilla, or papilla. Yeah, so the papilla is these little tips. And we will see that the urine is going to drip out of those papilla at the tips of the pyramids into the middle, where it's going to be collected by all this duct system. And I apologize for just having one color. I don't dare. It's not really telling me much how to change it. Oh, arrow up. No, I don't want. Okay, no, I'm not going to fool with it now. All right. So let's see. So I'll draw the collectors of the urine. So watch this. There's going to be these little tubes. Oh yeah, make these three meet. Now, what I've done in this, I didn't draw it on all of them, is I'm going to show you that the pyramids, the papilla is going to drip urine into these tubes. Notice these minor ones come into a major one. Usually 2 or 3 major ones there. They're called calyces. So minor, major, calyx is singular, or calyces is plural. Calyx. And you're going to have, I wrote out major, but minor is going to be the one before. So you've got dozens of minors that come into like 2 or 3 major calyces. And these are just smooth walled. You'll see them in lab. They're smooth walled structures that hold urine. That's the only thing that they do. And I kind of did that quickly, but these major calyces will come together into this big renal pelvis, this region here. Before the renal pelvis is where the urine gathers, and go down in urine. Minor calyx, major calyx, renal pelvis, ureter. Let me think what else I can throw on here. I guess I'll throw one more thing. So you see that cortex is the region outside the pyramids, on the outside, the cortex. Where the cortex dives down between the pyramids, we'll call these renal columns. So like right here, between the pyramids would be the columns. Yeah, so cortex on the outside, it dives down to the pyramids as the renal columns. whole kidney itself has a capsule around it, like this filmy saran wrap. The whole thing has a capsule you peel off and you really get to the organ. Everything does, right? The lung did, the heart does, it has like saran wrap on it. So it's shiny, big capsule on top of it. And if you were to cut it like this, kind of like a bagel, it looks just like this. You see the pyramids, papilla at the top, and these tough white tubes that collect in here. Minor calyces and the major calyces, the pelvis. I don't know. It's good to me. I don't know. Here, let's see. I probably have a store-bought picture here. Yeah, we can go back. So if you want to see, a better drawing of it, you can see the tips of the papilla here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just the minor calyx, like minor, major. You see that hole? That hole's going deep into the board. This is three-dimensional. The kidney, there's ones that are on the other side of the kidney. So they're all, remember, it's three. You tend to think of it as this picture with the triangles. It's really three-dimensional pyramids in the all. They're empty in here. Oh, God. It's like a kindergartner drew that. That's okay. All right, another view. Hope you guys got this down. And again, we have a lab, and look at this. So this is your kind of first run if you didn't know it already. So look at that. That pelvis is gathering all the pee, and it drips out of those tips of those pyramids. Cortex and Tubule. All right, looking good. You can kind of separate one of these, like cortex and one pyramid, into like one lobe, and I'll show you how it's really lobular. Like here's a dolphin kidney and a cow kidney. Just human kidneys, it starts out lobey, then it smooths over. So you can take one of these lobes and make one of those pyramids and all everything associated with it. Well, here's a human fetal. You can see it is lobey when it started out, and then it kind of smooths over. Yep, these kidneys, they're forming in fetal life. They're filtering your blood before you're born. So the respiratory system has to be tested when you're born. This thing's going, in your blood, even in utero. Well, here's a picture of a real kidney, and what I want to show you is that the pyramids look really stripy like this. That's because all these tubes are all parallel. Blood vessels and urine tubes. The cortex is more granular, it looks grainy. It doesn't look grainy here, but it does in what? It's kind of grainy, like pate or loamy. This is weird examples here, but it's just kind of grainy up there. And then the pyramids will look stripy, they look really different. Here's another view. The cortex out here. So we're going to be all these, the filtering apparatus is going to be out there. The whole medulla is just tubes. The tubes that are diving deep are going to be wicked important. One more view of the papilla. So see all the parallel tubes? Just realize your kidneys are just miles of tubes. And in the blood, the plasma is filtered out, and then the tubes reabsorb like 98% of that water. Tons of tubes. And if this was living and real, there'd be pee dripping out of the tip of this pyramid. So these tubes are going to make the filtrate ready to be peed out. By the time it gets down here, your body's like, that's it. That's my urine, masterpiece. So the medulla is going to have these things. See this little glomerulus, the little renal corpuscles? That's the reaction to it. So we'll get into that big time. And then when you're in the medulla, you don't see any of these. So you're going to see about each kidney is about a million of these glomeruli in each kidney. And they're on the cortex, all of them. Medulla is nothing but tubes and blood vessels. Medulla, just tubes. And tubes. Those office fans, Tube City, Michael said it once, but tubes everywhere. It's, yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the physiology of the kidneys, but what it does is that, oh my God, yes, it's amazing. Every day, you filter out of your blood 180 liters of fluid. Just imagine 180 liters. Now, you don't pee out 180 liters, you pee out like 1 or 2. So all this fluid is reabsorbed in these tubes. So you get tons and tons of tubes. They're going to take back that water. Yeah, it's a cool way to filter it. So if you look at this section of the kidney, holy yeah. You see these big things. These are the glomerulus. This is the blood vessels where the plasma is filtered. All this is tubes. All these are tubes. You can tell them. Get you the nephron. I don't think very cute, but this is a nephron. So a nephrologist, kidney expert, nephron. So a nephron is the unit of the kidney. You got 1 million per. And that's where the magic happens. This is where the blood gets filtered, and the tubes will reabsorb most of that filtrate, kick out the bad stuff, keep the good stuff. So when we looked at that last histological slide at the end of the papillary, there's nothing but tubes. These things are way up in the cortex, little balls of capillaries. I think I said that 3 times. How about the 4th time? It's a beautiful, beautiful view of the kidney. So the glomeruli are these balls of capillaries. And that is where the blood is going to be, the water is going to be pushed out of the blood. It's like 20 to 30% of the water blood is pushed out. That's a lot. And then the rest I see are tubes. So the tubes are going to help me reabsorb the water and the good stuff. Oh, the first blood supply. So, y'all know the renal artery goes to the kidney. Renal artery goes to the kidney. And then look at this beautiful cast of the kidney. They put latex in the kidney, shot it in when the kidney was fresh, and they dissolve the flesh away, and you're left with this cast of blood vessels. It's just beautiful. In fact, high blood pressure can damage the kidneys, diabetes can damage the kidneys, and all these delicate capillaries. And this beautiful electron micrograph, colorized, see those little tufts? Looks like kind of like tree branches with these like little tufts of flowers. The flowers there, the red is the glomerulus, the delicate capillaries where the blood is going to be filtered. Well, first we got to talk about the big vessels that get it there. So we'll learn some anatomy of how the blood gets there. Let's change this. All right, so this again looks like all those bronchial tubes I had to memorize, you know. So it's kind of like anatomy is memorizing different street names, but all right, let's just do it. You know, the renal artery comes in, the renal vein leaves. Bam, you guys got it. You guys know what percentage of blood goes to the kidney? 25%. Yeah. Good. All right, so the renal artery comes in, and then we tell these interlobular. It's going to come up the lobes, and then it's going to arc. Arcuate artery. It's going to go right at the edge of the cortex. So renal comes in, and then I don't care about that other term. And then interlobular goes between the lobes, then it's going to arc to the right and left. So basically, that's how the blood, most of the blood gets to the cortex like that. The lobes, most of the blood goes to the cortex, I should say. And then once you're in these arcuates, there's these branches that come up. We'll call them cortical radiate arteries. There's a new version of the book already out for next year, and cortical radial makes sense because it's going to radiate out of the cortex. Radiate out of the cortex. Cool. And then we get microscopic here, and we're going to have here's the glomerulus. This is ball of capillaries. Well, the blood going to it's called the afferent arteriole, afferent, and then the blood leaving is the efferent. Again, this terminology should be familiar. In the lymph node, we had afferent, lymphatic vessels, and efferent. So A before E, alphabetically, and what? You guys notice looking at it, which one's bigger, the afferent or the efferent? I think the afferent is twice as big. The consequence of that, turns out, is that it's like saving the pressure by putting a nozzle on a garden hose, is that it's going to build up the pressure in the glomerulus because the leaving tube is smaller. So it's going to cause pressure to back up. That's going to cause filtration. I'll give you some good stuff here. We're going to talk about it. And then what happens to the blood vessel once it goes through the glomerulus? It goes out to the urinary arteriole. Then we call it peritubular capillaries. Capillaries are going to like just wind around the tubes, and they're ready to absorb the water back. And the vitamins and the sugar and the good stuff, right? So peritubular capillaries after that. And then I think it'll be next lecture, but we'll get to a point we're talking about these long loops, these really deep loops here. And we have arteries, vessels called vasa recta, which means straight vessels. Remember rectum. Vasa recta. Oh, rectus abdominis, rectus femoris, straight. So vasa rectans, straight vessels. They're going to go like parallel to those tubes, straight. And that'll be important. You're going to see in setting up a concentration gradient in your kidneys so you can absorb water. And everything else is veins. So there's interlocular vein, arcuate vein, and eventually renal vein. All right. All right. So basically, you know, I think I have a chart here. Yeah, you can take a look at this. Interlobar between the lobes and the arcuate, intermediate, afferent, Marital, efferent, peritubular. You're like, great, Mom, you know that. You guys will know it. Right? Just go over it a couple times. Yeah, it's definitely time for a break. Looks like that. Yeah, take a break. All right, 4 minutes. Talk among yourselves. Any questions, let me know. 11:43.
I'm sorry. Usually I'm the one saying sorry, but I'm the one saying sorry to you. I'm usually the one saying sorry. True. You're right. You're right. Yep.
Feels like spring. The activity is going to be breeding and mating very, very soon here. Friday, 40% chance of rain, and temperatures are getting up there. I'm going to send out some uni announcement. You guys are going to go out at night. There's some places on campus to help the salamander across the road and frogs and do some science and things. So I was interested in that, email me and this, but it is me. I got head around to walk this little stretch of road and see these beautiful creatures. All right. So, what do you guys think? Any questions on the kidney so far? Gross anatomy. Now I'll get to the nephron. Let's see. Big picture that you guys understand. It's filtering your blood and making this filtrate. It's going to turn to urine. All right. So, looking at the nephron, that's our next step. And I'm just looking at this picture here. I can see it's a nice drawing here, but you see this this round thing here. Yeah, that's going to be this glomerulus, this ball of capillaries. It has this cup around it, this cup. And so those capillaries are going to leak fluid like crazy. They're going to be pushed out because of pressure into that cup. And that cup turns into this proximal, really convoluted tube. It's called the proximal convoluted tube. And then there's this loop. There's this big nephron loop that goes down. Some of these are really, really, really long. The loop's going to be important in setting up this concentration gradient of saltiness. And then the loop comes up, we call this the descending and ascending end of it. Then you have a distal tube, convoluted tube. And it's smaller, and it's also kind of squiggly, convoluted. And it's going to dump into these collecting ducts. Collecting ducts are not really part of the nephron because many nephrons dump into a collecting duct. This is where the pee is going to come down. The urine will drip down here. I'm going to give you guys the bottom line here. Guess what? Is that you can make really concentrated pee in the morning if you're really dehydrated or dark pee, or you make really watery pee, lots of pee. And it all has to do with how permeable this collecting duct is to water. And so if you want to get rid of water, you got too much fluid, you make this not permeable to water, and the pee just pours out. If you want to concentrate it, if you're dehydrated, you're going to open up pores along here, and the water will be sucked out, and very little pee will come out. I'm kind of giving you the physiology. It's pretty cool. And you guys know what hormone is going to open up these little pores for the water? You know it. I taught it to you. What hormone is going to make you retain water in the kidneys? Also called vasopressin. ADH, anti-diuretic hormone. It came from your posterior lobar pituitary, oxytocin, ADH. But that ADH is coming back to us now. This is what it does. It goes to these collecting ducts and it opens up pores, allowing the water to be sucked back into your bloodstream and you pee out less. If you have too much water, screw the ADH, don't make any, and the water's going to come out because it won't be sucked back in. And the whole purpose of this loop is to make it salty around here so that the water wants to be sucked out. I'm giving you like the punchline to my jokes, but that's the big point. Really cool, really cool. All right. So here's a kind of a cartoonish diagram to put out the nephron. Guys, I think you know the anatomy. You know that you have glomerulus is this ball of capillaries. Talk a lot about it. This capsule used to be called Bowman's capsule. It's just a nephron capsule now. And then you have a proximal tube, a loop, distal tube, and collecting ducts. And we call the glomerulus and the capsule the renal corpuscle. Renal corpuscle and then tubes. Some terminology for you. Yeah. So what fluid is running in these tubes? I guess it's whatever came out of the bloodstream, whatever filtered out. So it's water and plasma, waste, good stuff too. Bad stuff, good stuff, vitamins, there is. But this water that flows in these tubes, the tubes give you a chance to take back the good stuff. Take back 90% of the water. Oh, it's a gorgeous illustration here, right here. So we're zooming in on the renal corpuscle. It's just gorgeous. Talk about a theme in this class. This theme happens again and again. Is that what you have is that, remember I had like your heart and the lungs, and then you have a membrane, and then heart goes into it and develops it, so it's around it and then around the outside. Same thing here. What you have is like a parietal and visceral layer to this capsule. And so this out here is the parietal layer, and it comes up and it goes around the capillaries as the visceral layer. So it's just like a pinkish, heart, lungs, everything like this. So this capsule, we have a little, this glomerulus is like suspended in the middle of this cup, this capsule. And it's just squamous cells out here making the cup. And then the visceral layer of this is really freaking cool. I'm going to show you some beautiful pictures. But what's really on the capillaries are these, they're called podocytes, like podiatrists, like foot cells, podocytes. And you can see they look, oh, they even look cooler in real life. They're like little octopus. So that ball of capillaries is surrounded by these podocytes, this visceral layer of the capsule. And then the cup is going to be right over there. Maybe the capsular space or urinary space between. And then on top, you guys don't even need the labels. The afferent arteriole is much bigger than the efferent arteriole. And what that's going to do is going to back up, it's going to cause pressure there. And that pressure is going to cause this fluid to push out. And there's already blood pressure. But by kind of sphinctering up that exit tube, it makes the pressure higher. It's going to push out the water out of the blood. Now, you guys also, too, you can control the pressure because there's muscular sphincters here. You can. What would happen if you constricted this efferent arteriole and you closed it off more? At higher filtration, you more pressure. And if you open this up, there'd be less pressure. And if you close off the incoming one, there'd be less pressure. You can affect both of these arterioles to affect the blood pressure and the filtration rate. Just like you do on your garden hose, you can open or close that little, make it less and more pressure depending on how tight you turn the little squeegee thing. All right, so bottom line is blood comes in. What comes out of the blood is going to be the watery plasma, no blood cells, just the watery stuff and all the waste and good stuff into the space. And then the proximal tube is going to leave. So it's going to take the filtrate. We don't call it urine yet. Urine's when you're peeing it out. At this point, it's called the filtrate. It's like 180 liters. There's tons of good stuff in there too. So, what do you guys think? Blood pressure is pushing out, and we'll see what the filtration is, the mechanism on the capillary. That's the basics. Here's a real look at it. And so here's going to be all those glomerulus, that ball of capillaries. And this is just a perfect cut. You never see this. You can see this is where it leaves. This is going to be the proximal tube leaving. And that's where the blood vessels come in. The urinary and vascular flow on this sucker. I can see the, out here, look how squamous these cells are in the capsule. See nice and thin? Never forget our histology. Cuboidal, columnar, squamous cells. The squamous cells are making that nice capsule. So, just reviewing, you have tubes, you're going to be, the straight ones will be on that loop, otherwise they're convoluted, they're all going crazy, taking right left turns. And then proximal distal, again, I just throwing it out there, but normally we talk about the limbs, right? Your hand is distal to your elbow, but here it's how close it is to the glomerulus. So it's a little different, but just go with it. Yeah, and that loop, you can see a couple examples. This one on my side has a really long loop. This one has a shorter loop on the other side. We call the descending limb of the loop going down, the ascending limb of the loop going back up. All right. And all those glomerulus, all those corpuscles, they're in the cortex. Tubule is just tubes. Maybe focus on the blood vessels right now. Want to take a look and see. All right, there's the afferent going in. And what happens to the afferent? It turns into peritubular capillaries. Okay. And then what happens to the distal tube? Oh, it dumps into this like sewer. The collecting duct. It all is going to come out. Okay. Any questions? A bunch of tubes. And these tubes are wicked important. Oh my God. So they're the ones we're going to see. They're going to reabsorb the good stuff, push out the bad stuff. So the physiology of these tube cells, what are these tube cells, is where all the fascinating stuff happens. By the time that the urine comes down here, you can take out water if you want. Otherwise, it's on. Once it's out, it's out. If you're a really good histologist or nephrologist, you can look at the tubes and be able to identify them in a section of the kidney. I could. I probably could. But the proximal convoluted tube, this is my bottom line now, is that the proximal tube is where the most reabsorption happens. All the sugar, most of the water gets reabsorbed back. So when I look at that proximal tube, the cells are big. And see, they have little like villi on them, little extensions, little microfilament. So lots of surface area. So I just want you to know the proximal, the first part of the kidney tube is where most things is taken back. All the sugar, almost all the water comes back right there. Yeah. Okay, but important things happen all the way to the rest of it. But that proximal tube is the biggest, thickest cells that are working the hardest. All right, another term for you. When you look at a million nephrons, about 80% are cortical. They're just in the cortex. They've got short little loops. But 15% are called juxtamedullary, which means they're right next to the medulla. Like juxtaposition, like next to each other. So juxtamedullary just means they're right next to the medulla. They're right on the edge, the very bottom. And although it's only 15–20%, they're the ones that are really important for the water retention side. Their loops go deep into the pyramid. The cortical ones, the loops are shorter. They may go into the pyramid a little bit. So, and then in the kidney world, we talk about cortical nephrons, most of them, and then juxtamedullary ones are right on the edge with huge long loops. Ooh, cool. All right. So, this whole thing is the renal corpus. And the ball of capillaries is the glomerulus. And this is a beautiful illustration. I love it because it can get complicated looking at these like more artistic ones, but this shows it. Here's the afferent and efferent arterioles, ball of capillaries. And this is just kind of schematically, these will actually be podocytes that surround it. And then here's this space where the filtrates can go. You can really see they're connected, right? The visceral parietal are just connected. Oh, gorgeous. Oh, yeah, but this is beautiful too, because it shows the podocytes with their little feet, like a little octopus, but it shows the filtrate going down this tube. The filtrate leaves the proximal tube. That came from the blood. All that fluid came from the blood. It was filtered out. All right, this is complicated when you look at it. Like, oh, Jesus. But I'm just going to point out a couple things here. But we're looking at in the middle is the capillaries. They're coming at you out of the board. They're coming at you, going back. So these big circles are the capillaries and the glomerulus. They're like really tortured and go all over the place. But I want you to notice, if you look at the edge, it looks like, see these little like slits? Yeah, all of them have these little slits. They seem to have little holes on the inside, and they've got that black line, and then little slits on the outside. So that's going to be that filtration membrane I'm going to talk about. That's going to filter the blood, and it doesn't, it's too small for blood cells to get through, but the water can get through easily. So these are very holy. These capillaries are really leaky. And you have, these are the foot cells, the podocytes. They have their little feet out there with little fingers making these little slits on the outside. This delicate membrane is a filter. It's like a filter paper in your coffee maker that allows some things through, not big things. And then here's the tube leaving, where the proximal tube will leave. And as soon as it hits here, this filtrate, you start reabsorbing the water and the sugar. So 3 components to filtration apparatus. Well, I'll show you a much nicer picture. But the first thing is, this is the capillary, the glomerulus with the little holes. So the capillaries are really super leaky. They've got big holes in them. They've got a good picture. Then you can have the black on here is the basement membrane. So there's always a basement membrane for each layer. It's important in some diseases this gets screwed up, but basement membrane. And then the podocytes, or the foot cells, make these little slits right here. So there's the inside, the holes in the capillary, base of membrane, then little fingers that make little slits working as a filtering apparatus. Oh, that's so cool. Look at this guy, look at all the holes in this thing. You know, you take this back if it was your tire or something. I know there's holes in it, right? That's how holy the capillary is in the kidney. So water's gonna just pour out of these holes, right? But you know, blood cells as big as that capillary, it's not getting through, right? So blood's not getting through, proteins usually aren't getting through. But these are the holy capillaries, not my religious sense. And here's a view of these podocytes. These are on the surface of the glomerulus. I'm going to show you these pictures. They're going to blow your mind. They're so beautiful. But here, these are the foot cells. They've got these little octopus-like arms, right? Oh, okay. Looking at this up close, look at all these little slits, like little fingers coming together. And so the podocytes have these big arms and little fingers that come together, making these little slits. So imagine like the water pouring out between those fingers, the sugar, the urea, and everything. So here's a podocyte, and then two of them together, like two neighbors, the fingers will come together like that. And they'll make these little slits like that. And there's some thought that these can even like open and close a little bit, these slits. Oh, so delicate. Oh my God, people. Look at that, that's gorgeous, that is beautiful. That is, look at those little filtration slits. And here's this podocyte. Don't mind its own business, with its arms coming out like an octopus. And then another one has little fingers coming out. Yeah, so I showed you the capillary has holes in it. That's cool. But these podocytes are so awesome. They have little processes that make a filtration. So much like I wowed you in the lungs when I showed you how thin that membrane is, right? Same thing here. You're going to have, this is the capillary, so you're going to have this endothelium of the capillary that's holy, very whole, holes in it. Then base of membrane, you got to have that. And then here's the little fingers from the podocytes coming out of it. So this filtration membrane is just like a filter. Water can go through easily, but big stuff can't. And that's as far as our book goes. There's more complexity to it, but this is charged, and so it doesn't like proteins that don't tend to go through it because they're injected by the charge. And there's some other delicate things. You can imagine a lot of diseases. This delicate membrane, if that gets screwed up, man, the kidneys are not going to work, right? Especially like if you have big holes busted in this capillary, then blood's going to come out in your urine and proteins are going to come out. So this delicate membrane has to be nice and shaped. You got 2 million in your body, but yeah. Oh. Cool. Then I'll show you a couple more to hit home this filtration membrane, because it's just so important. So this really shows it. I like this diagram because it shows a couple podocytes and they meet, their fingers meet together, the little processes to make these slits. Oh, gorgeous. And then this is a nice, again, this is a nice diagrammatic. You can see here's the filtration membrane. I've got the capillary is holy, base of membrane, and then these little pedicels, these little fingers from the podocytes. Nice. Yeah. And so you shouldn't see a lot of protein in your urine. We'll test it. Almost everyone's got some protein. If you work out real hard, you know, blood pressure really high, proteins can slip through. If you've got some kidney damage, proteins will be in your urine. It makes it the frothiness of your proteins. You're all thinking, hey, my urine's frothy. You're okay. You always have a little bit of proteins. But these filters normally keep out proteins because you don't want to pee out proteins. Proteins are the good stuff, right? Sugar is too small. It does go through. But luckily, your kidneys like reclaim that sugar. And there shouldn't be blood in your urine either. But if you have damaged kidneys, blood can get through this membrane. So these things are keeping out the blood cells and the big proteins, but they let through everything that's small enough to get through that filter. Yeah. And I'll give you a little preview. The way that our kidneys work is if you had to clean out your pantry, there's 2 ways you could do it. You could go in your pantry and look for the expired food and take it out. Or you go in your pantry, take everything out, then put back the good stuff. That's what you do in your body. Everything comes out. This is non-selective, this filter. Sugar, vitamins, go, be free, and you want them back. And so the rest of the kidney sucks it back. So that's the way this works. It's not, there's no smart filter here. It doesn't like only get rid of the urea. Everything's going to come out. So blood pressure is going to push the water, good and bad, is going to come out into this filter. But tubes are there to pick back up the good stuff. Yeah, so I'm just showing you some more. I've already discussed this. You guys, rest your eyes over these. Take a look. You're seeing the filtrates coming out of the glomerulus being pushed out by that blood pressure. You see this urinary space is where that filtrate's going to gather. Also, I'm not calling it urine, I'm calling it filtrate. It comes out of the blood, and then the proximal tube is going to pick it up. It's going to go through all those tubes where it gets worked out. It's good stuff. All right, that's in belabor, but I like this illustration where I showed you. So see the filter? You see the capillary has holes in it? Basic membrane, and then you see the little slits in those podocytes. That's the filter we're talking about that makes your kidneys work. Any questions? We'll talk about what's called glomerular filtration rate. That's what you measure in your hospital to see how well the kidneys are working. So with higher blood pressure, more is going to come out, as you can imagine. When your blood pressure drops, that's the big danger, is that your kidneys don't work. And your kidneys will die irreversibly. All right, a couple more things on about that. All right, so let me tell you this: that distal, that loop, that big loop that came down. Well, the loop goes down deep, comes back up, and always comes up and kisses that nephron it came from. Goes right to the nephron it came from, right at the glomerulus, right where the arteries come in. And why is it doing that? The tube comes up, goes right to that glomerulus. Well, right at the glomerulus, as that tube comes back up, that's a place where you measure the amount of like salt that's coming up the tube that's already passed through the proximal, the loop. Now you want to measure how much salt and what the blood pressure is. So it's called the juxtaglomerular apparatus. I know those are big words, but it means it's right next to the glomerulus is this juxtaglomerular apparatus. And it's the ascending limb of the loop that comes up and just kisses it right there. So what happens there, if you look at it in a microscope, these are two just beautiful pictures, but you can see, here's the tube coming back up. See how dense the cells are? Yeah. So macula densa means spot, dense spot. And so there's lots of cells right here. And what it's doing is it's, those cells are measuring the amount of sodium and chloride in the filtrate that's coming back up. I'm going to tell you guys why. All right, so the fluid is moving through these tubes, right? It can move fast or slow. If your blood pressure is low, it's moving slow. Blood pressure is high, the fluid's kind of pushed faster, right? Now imagine if your blood pressure is really low, the fluid is moving slowly. It gives all the cells in the tube time to take back all the sodium. And so by the time it gets up there, it's very watery. But let's say the fluid is moving very quickly. Then, even though they're trying to take back the sodium, it's going too fast. Like a conveyor belt trying to take off the bad tomatoes, it's going too fast. And some of it's going to end up over here. So this measures how fast that fluid is moving in the tubes. And if it's moving really slowly, it freaks out like, damn, my blood pressure must be low. And it's going to secrete adrenaline. It's almost going to make your blood pressure. The other thing it's going to do is also measuring the artery, the stretchiness of the artery right there, the arterial. And if the pressure goes way low, it's like, oh crap, and it secretes adrenaline. So either the pressure directly is low, or the solutes are going to be not that much of it because it's been taken out because it's going so slow. The fluid's going too slow. So you have 1 million blood pressure monitors in each kidney. At each glomerulus, you're measuring your blood pressure. And if the blood pressure drops, it secretes adrenaline. You're going to see what that does. It makes your blood pressure fall. Pretty cool. There you go. So juxtaglomerular cells. Blood pressure is low, sodium levels, or you can directly stimulate it with the nervous system. I'll tell you what renin does. For now, renin is going to make your blood pressure go up. And so your kidneys are like an emergency switch, where if the pressure is too low, it secretes renin, and it really makes your blood pressure go up. A cool view again. Yeah. Here's some renin granules. Yeah. You pharmacy people, as you can imagine, if a patient has high blood pressure, you want to work here. So there's something called ACE inhibitors that work in blood pressure. We'll see. Renin is going to convert this angiotensin, and that's going to make your blood pressure go up. So if you inhibit making angiotensin, your blood pressure will go up. So I'll talk more about it. Cool, this looks like another illustration. But wasn't everything else to add? If there are any questions here. You all see the arteries coming in, you can measure this. You know about the filtration membrane now. Little slits. You know that space is going to gather the filtrate. The filtrate is going to make its way down the tubes. And in my at-home lecture, I'll talk about what happens in the tubes. Okay, got time to talk about a couple diseases here. All right. PKD, called business PKD, Polycystic Kidney Disease. I had a friend of mine who's an autopsy guy at the hospital. He came and had a person come give a whole talk about this disease. They had it. And so it's genetic. And there's a couple different forms. There's a dominant recessive form. And usually what happens, well, it always happens is that cysts grow in the kidney. That's not cancerous cysts. They're filled with fluid. But the issue is the kidney cysts form until they take over the kidney. And sometimes it doesn't occur to you in your 40s. And all of a sudden you like have pain in your back and your kidney function is lower, and you go to the doctor and they're like, holy cow, your kidney's huge. It has all these cysts on it. So we don't know, there's no cure to it. You want to eat a good diet, low in protein, low in salt, but there's nothing you can do about it. Oh, this picture shows a normal kidney next to a cyst. Oh, gosh. So they get huge with these cysts. Yeah, cysts can form other places in your body too. The main thing is these kidneys develop cysts. It's genetic. We don't know, really what to do about it. Look at this. I mean, you guys see the size of these? How that fit in a person, I don't know. But again, you guys, gross anatomy, if you look at kidneys, you'll see cysts on them, fluid-filled cysts. But these take over the kidney. It can be rapid or slow. But they take over your whole kidney. Your only cure is a kidney transplant. Speaking of kidney transplants, now we only need one kidney. So that means it sets up this uncomfortable family dynamic. So if your relative needs a kidney and you have two, shouldn't you give them your kidney? You only need one. How much do you like this relative? Well, shouldn't we be able to sell our kidney? Like, if someone offered you $1 million to sell a kidney, would you? Yes, I would. Someone else? Thank you. Yeah. Hell, I do it for half of it. All right, I'm cheap. All right, okay, I'll do it. Your risk comes 100,000. God, maybe. I'm really thinking, oh yeah, I think I will. But the thing is, the risk is you can live with one kidney, but if that kidney goes bad, that person's not going to get your kidney back. Right? So that's the risk. You have one kidney. There's some risk to surgery. It's very minimal. They just take it out this way and give it to you. And again, when I taught biology, we talked about altruism. That's helping other people, even though it hurts yourself. It doesn't really exist. I know humans. You think, of course, I give to charity and help people, ladies across the street. No, it's a great risk to you. The only way you do it really is for family, because it's your own genes. So if I have no kids, my brother has kids. If I help raise my brother's kids, I'm helping my genes. It's called inclusive fitness. So you help relatives. So when you look at kidney donors to strangers, it's really rare. You read about the news. Oh my God, they gave their kidney. So it's very rare because it's a great risk to yourself to give a kidney. I say great risk. It's a risk. So when we decide not to sell them in the U.S., most of the world, you can buy them in other countries. Again, I'm just kidding. Not appropriated. But there's Netflix documentaries on this. It's really sad because what it sets up is that the poor people will sell their organs to the rich people. It's a bad taste, right? Or the college students will sell their organs and they'll regret it. So we don't do that. You can't legally sell a kidney, but you can sell it. But the way that we do it is that if the kidneys are failing, you can be on dialysis. Dialysis is a machine called hemodialysis, where you hook it up to a machine, and the machine takes care of the kidney's function. It's a filter. You can do that for years. It's a pain in the ass. You got to go to an infusion center a couple times a week for 3 or 4 hours. You got to hook yourself up, and you don't ever feel great. So dialysis is hopefully a stepping stone to a kidney transplant. There's another kind of dialysis called peritoneal dialysis, where they fill up your peritoneal cavity with saline, and then the bad stuff goes into it, and you drain it. Some people can do that, at home even. But your kidneys are failing, you need a kidney transplant. You need a new kidney. And you want to find a relative that is as closely related to you, because we did the immune system. You want to recognize it so you don't reject it. And then when they put a new kidney in you, they don't go back where it used to be. They put it down the pelvis. It doesn't make sense. Your kidney can be in your arm, doesn't matter. As long as it's connected to the bloodstream. Okay, your arm would be my kidney. But they put it down the pelvis. There's plenty of room, move your organs around, connect the blood supply, connect it to the bladder. You're done, man. Well, you take immunosuppressive drugs, and hopefully that it takes, right? And then, yeah, you can have someone else's kidney. So when they died or a living donor, you can get cadaver, recently deceased person. We haven't figured out the freezing the kidneys and then making them viable. So it has to be a recently dead person or a donor. All right, any questions on that? You can get a kidney. You put it down here because there's no reason that it's not going to stick up there anyway. You want to put it down there. It's kind of saving your pelvis. All right, so if you hear of nephritis, you have nephritis, you got some kind of kidney infection. Nephritis. So glomerular nephritis is a particularly nasty one where your glomerulus breaks down. So I don't know if you guys can tell looking at this. I showed you a bunch of histology slides. There's way too much crap going on here. Too many dark spots. So these glomerular capillaries are gummed up. Too many cells. And if your glomerulus starts getting infected and clogged up, your kidneys start failing. Yeah, your blood pressure goes up, so nothing's happening. So the main cause of this is like strep infection. You get some kind of infection that you have, and then that infection, you make a bunch of antibodies. They stick on the pathogens. They make their way in the blood to your kidneys. Then they get lodged in that delicate filtration membrane. Then they cause inflammation. White blood cells come in. You kind of like make inflammation in the glomerulus. And it can be acute, happen really rapidly, or it can be chronic. And some people with acute, after they have a bad toxin or infection, they can die. Acute, so they can destroy the kidneys within weeks. The chronic ones, they can kind of manage. But, they can tell this, like they'll do a biopsy, put a big needle in your kidney, they'll look in the microscope, and then an expert will say, oh, geez, your glomeruli. Oh, and then kidney stones. I've never had a kidney stone. I know people with kidney stones. Apparently, more painful than childbirth, some people said. They've had experience that way. But look at this thing. These sharp edges going through your urine or your urethra and stuff in your kidney. Oh, that's really sharp. All right, so kidney stones can form anywhere. They can be up in the calyces, in the pelvis, and they can cause, you don't even know it, but sometimes they'll pass down your ureter, and they'll get stuck in there. So it'll spasm, and your kidney itself will start swelling up from the back pressure, and then lots of pain, right? So they can be made of various things. It's basically this: if your urine is really concentrated, you'll have precipitation of the concentrates. Mostly it's calcium oxalate. You can have struvite ones, sometimes in bladder infections. There's uric acid ones. So something in the urine is really concentrated and it's kind of static. It's going to cause precipitation and making it these crystals. If they're small enough, you pee them out. We'll see it in your urine. We'll see crystals. But if they get big enough, they can lodge and cause pain. And so what causes it? I mean, if you drink a lot of water, you should be good. But there's genetic. Obesity, genetic, diet. If you have like a lot of salty foods, a lot of calcium oxalate, a lot of nuts and chocolate, certain vegetables have a lot of this in it, but if you have a lot of, if you have kidney stones, those maybe probably change your diet to make you drink more water. And they can get rid of these now. They put you in a big metal tank and they use sound waves to break them up. You can do it surgically, but hopefully they use this like sound waves to break them up. Then they pee out the sand, you know. But if they're big crystals, you need to break them up or go in there again. So. Oh, here's a couple of phone cases I found that I would get if I can't find out what they are. If you're really into kidneys. All right, you guys, have a good one.